Hey, Tim, what's going on, Don? Jimmy, papers I'm supposed to pick up?
Yeah.
Yep, at the
Right
door.
back by the door, you walk right past.
Oh, thank you.
Probably should have a big sign on it, says pick one before you come in.
Give me 1 second, Don. All right.
All right, can everybody hear me? I'd like to welcome you to this brand new meeting of the Contractor meeting once again. My name is Don Pratt, if you don't know who I am. I've worked here at Aransas in the city since October. I've been in this community for 2 years, working for a company called DV. I've been working as a building inspector for 18 years. This is my first shot at being a building official.
Don't blow it.
Yeah, I am trained in all phases of the code. I have ICC certifications for every phase. So what we're going to do today is kind of clear up a few things and show and tell you where I'm looking for these days. Okay? So if you will hold all your questions till we get to the end, write them down, then I'll try to answer them the best I can. Okay? First of all, let's start with the plumbers. Any plumbers in this place? No plumbers. Okay, well, you building guys are going to have to relate this to your plumbers. Toilets, faucets, and sinks that are not being replaced for a remodel and do not change the drains, venting, or water lines shall not require a permit. The reason for this is homeowners can do this themselves. And nobody watching. So we're just gonna take that right off the books so nobody has to put a permit together for it. Water heaters, water softeners that are not already plumbed in on a new construction. Steam rooms or steam showers not already installed in the initial construction of the building shall require permits. And I don't care if it's electric or gas. If you're a plumber and you're putting in a water heater, you need a full permit. If you're a contractor doing a remodel and they ask for a water heater, you need to pull a permit. Those things are required by code. Those are appliances that can cause great damage to your house should they be installed wrong. And I don't want to see somebody's multi-$1,000 home have a big hole in the roof from the water heater. So we're going to go ahead and permit those. All right? Pretty much nothing else changes for plumbing. We're going to be in the ICC 2018 code. So we're not going to be using 15 anymore. And that's probably going, when are we going to put this all into effect? May 1st is when we're planning to get this all squared away, which will give you plenty of time to catch up on what needs to be caught up. Mechanical permits, there seems to be some questions with this in the mechanical field. So let me run this past you. New duct runs, air handler units, compressors, dehydrators, and when breaking the ceiling is removed or changed to add components to the HVAC system, those require permits. Now, if you're changing a dryer duct cover on the outside of the house, don't care. Okay, because that doesn't technically break the ceiling of the AC unit. So if you break the mastic or the tie wraps or whatever's there, they need to pull a permit for it. If you're going to install some sort of device in your AC system, it needs a permit. Okay? Air handlers being the compressor and the coils and anything that has to do with that air handler where you have to break it apart, it requires a permit. All right? That's pretty much some of the things I've seen that we've failed to do as we've moved forward in this city. And I just kind of want to reiterate those things. Those are things that have always been required by code to have a permit, and they need to start being done. As far as electric goes, here's something for you. This ought to be pretty straightforward. New panels, meter enclosures, adding new circuits, in the addition of wiring to storage sheds or accessory structures require a permit. I don't care how big this shed is, I don't care how big the accessory structure is, if it's got electrical in it, it needs a permit. And the changing of existing fixtures or hanging of ceiling fans on existing boxes, the big key here is existing, shall not require a permit unless it is part of a remodel in which the wiring is being changed. Okay? If you're adding these things, then yes, you need a permit. Let me go over here. All right, now here comes the big stuff. Those are all pretty straightforward. People have asked me about those, and I just wanted to get those out of the way. Okay? Buildings, sealed fencing and sand abatement will be required at construction sites and maintained until landscaping is installed. That's the original ordinance. That didn't get changed. I'm just reiterating it, that it needs to happen. So, I don't like this sand blowing in my face while I'm walking to look at plumbing or anything else, because I don't wear glasses half the time. I get blinded really easy. But anyway, so if we'll lay the straw out or the sand or keep it damp or put the silt fencing up to like required and maintain them. That's the big key. People put silt fencing up and for 6 months they don't do anything with it, and before you know it, they're laying flat on the ground. So we need to start maintaining these. If there seems to be a problem with that, then I will end up having to take a little more drastic measures like issuing stop work orders until it's corrected. Because it is required by the ordinances of this city. And I'm going to make sure y'all all know that it needs to be there. Shipping containers. This is a new thing for the city of Port Aransas. Well, it seems that people want to bring in shipping containers and turn them into offices and homes and buildings and things like that. They will require permit in engineering per the IBC 2021 Code Section 3115. All that material that's required to make them into these homes, businesses, and living quarters will have to be followed. That is the only part of the 2021 code that we will be adopting at this time. We're going to stay with the 2018 until we get everybody caught up on the same page. So, also, all containers, sheds, or accessory buildings will be subject to submitting a permit application. It doesn't mean you gotta get a permit. That means you're gonna submit for an application for this building. The reason for it is, we wanna see how it's going to be anchored to the ground. So you'll submit the permit application along with how you plan on anchoring it to the ground. This is every shed, accessory structure, or building, or containers. They're not being used for residential. We want to know that in case of another hurricane, which will come eventually, that Joe Blow's shed or his structure or his shipping container is not going to end up on James' house or float through the front door. So that's why we're doing this. I know it doesn't seem like it's that big of a deal, but if you've lived in this area for any length of time and you've been through a hurricane or two, you'll know why we're doing this. It's a basic safety rule. It's basic safety for your neighbors and for the people you're building for. So we need to do that. Okay? All right. Any removal of walls or ceilings will be considered a permissible remodel. Because if you're removing walls and ceilings, you're going to have to replace insulation. If it's a remodel, I'm the one that's going to have to come look at it. Not a third-party rating company, me. So, therefore, if you're removing walls and ceilings, you're probably going to be taking out insulation. So, therefore, you need full permit for it. Okay? Well, that's where we're at with those. Here's the big one for everybody that's not used to it. A form survey indicating building location and finished slab height shall be submitted with the plans and review. So in other words, we want to know what the slab height is going to be before we build the house, to see if it matches the elevation certificate at the end of the building. Okay? If there's any problems, we want to try to catch them as soon as we can, before you start slapping wood up. And that's basically why we're gonna do that. Plus, we're gonna make sure that your house, seeing how it's getting a little more crowded out here in Port Aransas building, is not on somebody's property line. Okay? Because that causes more problems than you ever want to deal with, trust me.
We've checked with virtually all the surveying companies that you're probably using. They have a package. Obviously, that's not our place to tell you, but again, yes, it's another cost, but we've looked at this for a couple of years actually, and just talk with your surveyors in whatever package bundle that they prepare for you. And like I said, you won't find that it's going to be all that much. And I assure you, at some point in your career, it will save your bacon. So, like I said, there's just been too many close calls that for that a little bit additional charge to the process. It just outweighs the risk. Certainly, that we didn't do this without a lot of consideration. So,
Okay. So we figure it's a safety valve and CYA for both y'all and us. Okay? Cause us less problems in the long run. Okay, let's go to the sheds. ICC, okay, IRC. Sheds, and accessory structures and stuff like that on a property less than 200 square feet or less do not require a permit unless they have electrical in it. Okay? Anything over 200 square feet requires a permit. So it requires, when you submit your plan, your permit application, that's what I'm going to draw and see where it is and how big it is. Okay? Holopolis and accessory structures is not where the poles are. It's where the edge of the roof is. Because that's what you get charged for the building, and that's what we're going to look at. Okay? So that's where those need to be, and I need to know exactly where they're on the property with measurements. I don't care if you get a form survey or you get exact measurements off that property line and set back. That's fine. I prefer that you get a form, a survey, a plat survey, and show me where it's going to be on the property with some measurements. So that's all we're requiring on that. Also, in commercial, it's 120 square feet is the maximum. So anything over 120 square feet on a commercial job will require a permit. All right? Energy. Here we go. After several years of bouncing around on this energy project, on how we're going to do this energy, this is what we're going to do after May 1st. Energy plans shall be included with the energy, all plans shall include the energy rater's company name and address of the company contracted by the builder. Any contracted company shall be required to be a registered contractor with the city of Port Aransas. That way we know for a fact that they're supposed to be here. Okay? And most of them don't have a problem with becoming registered here. It doesn't cost a lot of money, and it's very simple to do. And I'm going to warn you right now, if anybody you're using as a sub or a builder does not have a registration with the city, you probably ought not use them. Because if I catch them out there without a registration, I'm going to start writing them stop work orders immediately, without any delay. Say, hey, come on, get on down to the city and register your company. I'm not going to play that game anymore because we've let too many people walk off of jobs, never been registered, and then we come back with, hey, how come I can't get hold of Joe Blow's company? That's because Joe Blow wasn't a registered contractor, doesn't have any surety or insurance bonds with the city, and he don't want to talk to you anymore because he's already got your money. So we're not going to do that anymore either. Everybody has to be registered with the city of Port Aransas.
how many people are currently using a third-party energy rating company for your testing? Bring your hands a little higher. Those that aren't, again, probably those folks might be a good folks to get a hold of and just talk to, maybe get some suggestions. We know it's new territory for some of you, for us as well, but like I said, we think we'll have a pretty good plan in place. And it just, again, just one more thing that we put off as long as we possibly could, but it's the right thing to do, and it's especially the right thing for the consumer.
Also, I'm feeling that, there may or may not be that many energy raters available to the island out here, But once this hits the news that we're going to require them, you may be surprised at how many show up. Okay, there may be more that come in. They just need to be registered with the city before you contract with them. Okay? All right. Also, on the energy raters will not be required for remodels unless they become substantial remodels. Substantial remodel is where it costs more than half the value of the property to build, to rebuild or remodel. Once you hit that stage, then you will need an energy rater because it's basically new construction with an addition. Anything less than that, call into the city for your installation inspections on remodels. Okay? Here's something that we're doing, being how we're going to be using energy raters, and we're already to the point where a lot of the slabs are engineered, the windstorm is engineered. Now, windstorm is engineered, not framing. Let's get that squared away. The windstorm engineer is there for two things. One, to look at your strapping and to make sure your house is going to fall down in your property and not over on Jay's property. So, that they do not look at notching, boring, where the pipes are, how they cut the wood, or anything like that. So there still will be a framing inspection required. However, if you have an engineer looking at your slab, and about 100% of you do, all I'm going to require is that as soon as he looks at your slab and he gives you that little piece of paper or that writes you a letter that it's fine or whatever, that you take a picture of it and upload it to your project in MyGov. And if you have a problem with it, I'm sure somebody in our office can help you do that until you get the hang of it. I know I'm not extremely computer literate, but I try. And I will tell you something, I can crash a computer much faster than anybody in here, I'm pretty sure. So let's try that. Also with that will be the energy raters file. Because if you're having them look at your insulation, they're also looking at your energy file. You need to get that in on the system. Whether it be take a picture of it, upload it, or have him upload it straight to your website, whatever it is. Okay? So we're going to need a copy of that. We're also going to need, I'll be making sure that all your inspections as far as seconds and finals are done on per code. So that you won't have to worry about how to look at and stuff. But we're talking about possibly the COCs and the final buildings, not necessarily the final buildings, but the final contract or the building, the whole thing, the construction. All those will need to be submitted prior to the building fund, because those things, the engineers, the WPAs, your energy, and all that stuff is required in order to get the CO. So if you can get it by the time you get your building file and get it uploaded, you're that much further ahead. And your elevation certificates, okay? You're that much further ahead. Now, I understand that some of these engineers are not the most prompt individuals at sending this stuff. So, as long as you get it to us as soon as possible, okay? And we know where these engineers are that have a little problem laying down on there or getting things done because they're so busy and they have so much work to do. But we'll work on that. We'll work around that best we can. Okay? And pretty much, just to let you know, for a building file, all your trades and you as the contractor need to be current and registered with the city. Okay? Something we all have to do, so we're just going to make sure that it's all there at the file. So if anybody has a problem with that, you better make sure that contractor, that subcontractor you're using is always pretty much registered with the city. Now, I understand there's some of them out there that once January the 1st, 2nd, or 3rd rolls around, and then I walk in there and go, hey, look, your registration expired on 31st December. Then all I'm going to basically do is tell you, get your subcontractor to come down here and register with the city, and we'll just carry on like nothing happened. All right? We're working on, just for your information, I can put it in here because I really haven't gotten all approval on it. But my plan is that if your permit expires, okay, and it's 1 to 3 months expired, $15 renew, 25. I'm sorry, 25. This is something we're looking at. It's $25 to renew this 3 months out of date, okay? If it's 6 months, it's 50. If it's 9 months, it's 75. And if you, did I say dollars or percentage? I did dollars. A percentage of the original fee, okay? So, and if you're over 12 months expired, you're paying the whole 100% back in those fees. Now, this is not policy yet. It's still got a lot of tweaking. It may be 25, 50, 75, 100, okay? But we figured, I'm figuring, and we're looking at it, if we get some kind of penalty on how far, but right now, all you do, if your permit's over a year old or a year old, you just come to the office, pay $15, and we renew it. That's not gonna work that way anymore, okay? That's not fair to us to have to renew your permit, start all over again, and redo inspections if we have to, and things like that. These ladies up here work pretty hard trying to get your permits out on a reasonable amount of time. And if you have to come back in and renew your permit, we want to remind you, if we get around to it, like I said, this is an ordinance right now. It didn't happen. But I'm just kind of throwing this out here to see what everybody thinks about it later. Okay, y'all think about it, write me a letter, whatever, we can talk about it here next while.
Don, just to clarify though, we're talking about permits that are dormant, where there's been no.
Yeah, well, there's been no.
Obviously, some big houses.
I'm talking.
We understand that it takes longer.
Okay, no.
Permits that sit that were pulled.
I should have clarified that.
Yeah.
If you've had an inspection on your house within the last, on this trade, within the last 180 days, which is 6 months, no problem, okay? If you've gone over 6 months, then we start looking at how many months it's been since you had your last inspection and how far your permit's out of the field. That's when we start looking at it, okay? That should be, I should have left that in there a little bit sooner, but I didn't, and I'm sorry for that. My apologies if I scared the heck out of anybody, especially this young lady right here in the middle who's going, oh my.
Everybody gets their houses built in 6 months, right?
Yeah, I know. But anyway, we just want to make sure y'all are aware of it and try to keep track of what's going on in your job, okay? And where you're at. All right, signs. I don't know if anybody here puts up signs, but let's talk about these signs that keep going up in places that I don't see any permits for, don't do any inspections for, because gee, they may or may not have pulled a permit. So if you got anybody you're working for and they need to put a sign up, all signs installed, repaired, replaced, or changed shall require a permit application to determine if a permit is required. Any signs involved in electrical will require a sign and an electrical permit. Elevated pole signs will require engineering as to the anchoring and windstorm. And that's pretty much all I got to say about signs. That's all you need to know about them. That's all that has to happen. All right, there's a line on here about dumpsters and porta potties. Oh, our favorite things. They are required on job sites, 1 for every 10 people, per their recommendations in the porta potty. Okay? They're not allowed to be in the streets, neither the dumpsters nor the porta potties. The job sites must be kept clean and not allow for trash and materials to blow around. Storm drains and streets are required to be kept clean. In the event of a storm or hurricane, we will require job sites to be secured. And trust me, in the 2 or 3 days before the hurricane news, I'm going to be going to job sites and to see what's loose and laying around. Okay? And could cause problems with people's lives and the property. Also, I would like to have you people, if you have a storm drain near your site, please put some wire and brush or a wire and plastic mesh to keep dirt and sand from going down into the storm drains. I mean, that should be just automatic. And the reason is because we don't really need to filter out the 5 or 6 Bud Light cans, the 7 or 8 plastic bottles, and the 15 wrappers from Stripes. in our sewer system. And all that pretty much goes out to the nice little fishies who just had a rough time. So we need to keep an eye on that, okay? So pretty much that's all I got on this. Anybody got any real burning questions for this?
Hey, Don, just a clarification. So back on the engineering that you talked about, I know that the use of engineered products, trusses especially, has become pretty prevalent. So
That's usually in the winch ones, engineers thing about what you do.
well, I guess what I was asking, so somebody has to modify or the
Yeah,
contractor
I mean-
finds a subcontractor modified an engineered component.
Yeah, you go through some stuff like the top quarter on the TGI, or you go to web truss, or you drill a hole that's over 3/4 of an inch big, and laminated beams on the ends, especially, those things are gonna require an engineer's stitch or an engineer's letter stating they're okay.
Can the truss company's engineers?
The wood company engineers actually should be the ones that look at it. They're the ones that know the product best. So that's what we'll be looking for on that. I mean, if you've got 2 half-inch holes in the middle of a lamb beam, dead center, in the center mass of it for wiring, I'm not gonna ask you to get an engineer's letter, because that's allowed on lamb beams and engineered trusses and things like that. What I'm worried about is top cords and big holes and holes near the end of the lamb beams. That's where the weight's all carried at. That's where it can get crushed at. And that's why they're not allowed there. If you keep it in the middle third, in the center of the beam, probably not gonna have a lot of problems till you get over an inch big. And once you get that way, or you get a bunch of them in one spot, then you're gonna need an engineer to say that's not gonna harm anything. Okay? Yes, sir. I'm referring to the whole unit. Has to be permitted. Yes, sir. Okay, yeah. Yeah, I just, I run into a couple of houses where these steam generators were put in after I'd done the mechanical. And I'm like, okay, we're just covering. And everybody's answer is, I don't know. I'm like, somebody knows. And why is it on your permit? Okay? If you have a permit to do the electrical on the house, and it says new construction wiring, and I come over to your place, and there are 2 outlets for RVs sticking out in the middle of the next door property that you own, that was not on your permit. Okay? You need to address that by adding that to your permit. The reason is, the fees could be a little more, they may not. And number 2 is that way we make sure that they're all legal and permitted. So if you change anything in your house, structure, the wiring, the plumbing, all of that needs to be revised. You need to bring me a copy of what you're revising with the print of where you're revising it. And we'll just add it to your thing and I'll look at it and see if it's feasible. Well, that's not gonna cost you no money. It's just gonna be on the plans. So when in 20 years, when somebody says, I don't think this is right, you're still going, well, you're right, because that wasn't permitted or looked at. But in this case, we have a provision that shows it was there and it was inspected. So that's what we're gonna need from everybody, is to keep track of it. If you change something in your house, just call me, ask me if it needs a revision. I mean, if you don't know, I'll tell you. So, I don't mind, just didn't know that I'll answer my phone faster than anybody in this town, but as soon as I can. I mean, I don't care, I'll answer your questions. You got something to yell at me about, you want to yell about somebody else? Sure, I'll listen to you. Will I do anything? Just depends on how big you yell is, and how bad the problem is, okay? But anyway, I'm gonna try, my job here is to not slow building down, okay? If we can do all this the way it needs to be done, you can turn around a house just as fast as you can. I mean, as everybody knows, I've written past partials for things. I've allowed you to carry on with stuff that I'll catch on the next inspection. I would like to someday eventually get to having all 3 of the trades called in at once, and the framing if possible. And then get them all four out of the way, you're on to your next level of the building, okay? If I have to go out there for the plumbing, and then go out there for the electrical, and then go out there for the mechanical, and then go out there for the framing, that's 4 trips. That means you gotta wait for every one of them contractors to get finished on their time, and then call in your inspections as they come. I don't care, it's up to me, it's up to you. And I've been trying to do that with houses that I can walk into, let's say for a plumbing run. They call in for a plumbing top out or whatever, and the electrical's done, and the mechanical's done, I'll go ahead and pass it. If I think they're ready. If they're not, then I won't. But I'm trying to help speed up this process. And if we do everything right and do everything the way we're supposed to, you should be able to build a house pretty quick without having to wait 4 weeks. Think about it. You're waiting 4 weeks for your framing to get done if you're doing every trade separately. Okay? You can probably get done with all your trades in 2 to 3 weeks if you just let them all go at one time. You know, get the plumber in there, do his thing, get the mechanical, do his thing. I understand the plumbers, we don't have enough test cases to do all that. And we don't have enough test balls. Well, this is where it's going to be the contractors to kind of keep track of what's going on their jobs. If the mechanical and electrical tell you the plumbing's already done and the mechanical and electrical tell you they've gotten done 2 weeks later, a couple of days before you decide to call in that inspection, call your plumber and tell them to come, that you're going to have an inspection on this day, so you can fill it up and retest it, or test it. And we got it done. I mean, it's that simple. Okay? I understand, oh, I got a test ball over here, I don't have enough for this one. Well, we're not going to require you to have a test ball 24 hours a day for the next 2 weeks. We just want to see the test on it when we get there to do the inspection. So if we get them all done once, I believe you'll find that it's going to make it faster instead of slowing you down. Because I know the faster you can get through the framing and get your insulation up, that's where your house really picks up speed. So that's what we're working on. All right? Does anybody have any questions? Have I been clear as mud? Okay, well good. Long for all blinded back, and I'll let the girls over here and Rick tell you some more stuff. Thank you. Thank you.
We're going to talk a little bit about some floodplain issues, finished floor elevation issues. Nicole Boyer, part of my staff, is the floodplain administrator, she's a certified floodplain manager, and she's the one that takes most of the heat before me, city manager, and mayor when it comes to FEMA audits and FEMA inquiries is our process. So just wanted to touch on a few things that kind of relate to construction and maybe touch on why it seems like you take a pretty hard-ass approach to some of this stuff.
So the reason that we do take such a hard approach to it is because what you guys do and what we allow you to do can really affect everybody's flood insurance. So if we were to not keep everybody up to these standards, they could just cancel the whole city's flood insurance. So nobody here could get flood insurance, which means you wouldn't be able to get anybody that could get a federally backed loan, which would be detrimental to the city, obviously. But also they can just increase everybody's rates, which would make us very unpopular. So we definitely don't want to do that. I'm sure most of you are aware that with the 2015 codes that it did add a foot of freeboard. So we do require you to be built 1 foot above basement elevation. Now, another thing that we've seen some issues with this year is people don't realize that all of the mechanical equipment that needs to service that house also has to be elevated to that 1 foot above. So your air conditioning, condensing units, your hot water heaters, any generators, anything that is, that you would need a permit for has to be elevated to that elevation. We see it a lot in remodels when people come in and want to remodel maybe the bottom floor of a unit. They don't realize that at some point that habitable space down at the bottom was added illegally and without a permit. And so in order to remodel it, they do have to get that bottom to be elevated to the correct elevation too. And there's just really no way around that. anything new, any addition, any lateral additions have to be built to the new elevations, so that's 1 foot above base flood elevation. And then anything that's allowed to be below base flood elevation, your garages, your storage areas, anything that's below that 1 foot above base flood elevation has to have flood vents. So that's a new one that we're seeing. People think that just because it's above base flood elevation, it doesn't need flood vents, but unless it's above that base flood elevation +1, flood vents are required.
Just a good rule of thumb for those that do remodels, if it's an older home on stilts, it's probably on stilts because it needed to be elevated out in the floodplain area, and any habitable space down below, there's a good chance it's going to be illegal. So just that rule of thumb is held true 99% of the time. So just be advised. Obviously, new construction, a lot of you have gone up on stilts to maximize the use of the space itself and for parking and others. But the older homes, if they're up on stilts and there's habitable space down below, it should raise a question, and you need to come check with us.
Yeah, we can look up that information and figure it out for you and help you out with it.
There is no grandfathering when it comes to that, and it's painful and it's tragic for people that have bought houses thinking that it was usable. But as Nicole explained, we could never defend losing our participation in the flood insurance program because we let something slip, and that is the stick that FEMA carries. So.
And we have our very first audit the week after next, so.
Thanks. I want Carla to talk a little bit about city code enforcement, just some issues that she sees. We still remain pretty much a complaint-driven operation when it comes to code enforcement, unless, we just happen to be at the right place at the right time and see something that Carla may call you on. But just talk a little bit about some general things that we see and that we get complaints on, and then we usually, have to come to you guys about.
Mostly it's the parking issues with your subs. You're blocking traffic, garbage truck can't get down. If the garbage truck can't get down, the fire truck, the ambulance can't get down it. Need to make sure that either they're carpooling, they're parked on one side of the street, it's gotta be wide enough, guys. Trailers on the streets, unattached, they've gotta be attached to a vehicle. Can't have them unattached. Signs, contractor signs, once the job's done, take them down. You're not allowed to keep them up, advertising. And basically, that's pretty much it.
Manage the trash and debris on the site. We know that, cold fronts blow through and trash gets blown around. We're not out there waiting for that to happen to write a citation, but, I think in almost all instances, we'll give you a call and just, again, probably because we've received a call. So just like I said, as best you can, get on it pretty quickly, just to avoid any of that blowing around town. Erosion control as well.
Yeah, for sure.
We've seen that almost everybody does a much better job. Silt fences, like I said, those sites where there's a lot of blowing sand. Again, just manage them. Just look to the right and left, behind and in front, and see if there's any neighbors there, because they're the ones that they're gonna rat you out faster than anybody.
And when Don was talking earlier about current with the city, he means licenses and insurance. We see a lot of, we registered, but your license has expired since then, your insurance has expired since then. We have one contractor that every month, his insurance is month to month. Then he calls up complaining to us because he can't request an inspection. Make sure you're current. Basically, that's it as far as where, if you have a question, do you need a permit? Come see us. Apply for the permit. We'll let you know whether it needs one or not.
Thanks, Carla. I'm going to put Cara and Laura, our permit technicians, on the spot. Check out their public speaking abilities, but I'll let you guys decide who goes first. But just like I said, if you'll just talk about anything we consistently see that's regarding permitting and calling them in or inspections that you think, you know, we could mention that makes it a little easier? To the mic.
Oh, yeah.
No different
There's
world.
one other thing I'd like to say. I'm sure everybody can hear me. I don't usually hold a low voice. Would you please try to complete your projects and get all the inspections called in? I know there was a lot of them left over from the hurricane issues. We're past that now. And I've still got 19, 20, and 21 permits that are past their 180 days since their last inspection, and we're holding them for building files. That's all we're holding them for. Electrical building files. Call them in. I mean, it's that simple. It's not that hard. All right, I'll let them talk.
So mechanical permits have changed. They're, by how many inspections you're gonna have. So a lot of them that are being put in online, we have to put them on hold until they tell us how many inspections there's gonna be. And then the new permits, a lot of the subcontractors still try to pull permits. So if you sign a contractor acknowledgement form, you don't have to pull permit here. It's all one permit with the general contractor's permit.
Unless it's a pool.
Yes. I thought it was the mouse and pool too.
Well, yes, but a lot of them that are building the new construction houses, a lot of them.
Oh, okay, yes, I
include-
get, okay. Yeah, pool permits are separate from the general contractor.
Do you have any questions about calling in inspections, anything that you struggled with or you're not quite sure of as far as the process goes? We continue to try to push more and more online. We know not everybody's an online person, but again, as an option, since the majority are, we try to push more and more towards that more automated process. Slowly but surely. Yeah. Right. So again, I think we've seen more swimming pool construction since the hurricane, the 3 years since the hurricane, than I've seen in probably 20 years prior to that. So it's obviously it's a vibrant part of construction nowadays. However, we continue to have problems finishing out the pool process with finals and the final inspections. Don's been pretty good about not holding up certificates of occupancy if the pool, as it's completed, can still be safe and locked off. Access can be protected from the house. It's not always easy. Sometimes it's impossible. But please stay on your pool contractors to finish the project. Barriers, all of that. We don't want to hold up in those instances where we can't separate the house itself from the pool. We don't want to hold up the C of O. We understand that you guys need to get these closed, and C of Os are usually a pretty important component to that process. So,
And we're not going to issue a short-term rental registration if there's a full permit open.
yeah,
It will not happen.
that's a good point. So regardless, if you're building that house for somebody that's going to rent it, and that's the vast majority, that's a big deal. Again, if we catch them, that is because it's a safety issue. It's a life safety issue. Without barriers in place and all the other safeguards, we'll take a pretty hard approach to safety, life safety issues like that. So, help us help you. That's all I'm saying. Is that, like I said, it is a separate permit process. But we continue to have problems. So, just another clarification, Don, on the smaller structures, the accessory structures.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that it might appear that there was a conflicting. I just want to make sure I'm on the right page with what you and I talked about. So, for those that don't require a permit necessarily, we want an application, and we want to ensure that they're secure. So it says strapping and meet wind loads. again, correct me if I'm wrong, Don, we're not necessarily pushing those accessory structures to an engineer to be done, but we just we want some indication as to how they're gonna be secured. For example, accessory structures, we know that what an engineer is gonna tell you is go to Lowe's or Home Depot or McCoy's or someplace and buy an auger, the right size auger and strap it.
Let me explain something. Just because you fill out a permit application for this structure, you submit your paperwork on how you're gonna anchor it, I tell you it's a certain size, it's not gonna need a permit. The documentation is for us and you to prove that it was there and you were supposed to do this. Doesn't mean I'm necessarily gonna come out and look at it. But what's gonna happen is, if you don't secure it like it says it's going to be, and it ends up in yard A against A's house, all I'm gonna do when they come to us and go to inspect it, say, no, it doesn't require inspection, but here's the drawing on how it was anchored, or supposed to be anchored. So I'm gonna cover my ass and keep the city out of it by going, well, they were supposed to anchor it this way and they didn't require a permit. And if they don't anchor it that way and it ends up over here against this house, who's gonna get in trouble for it? Not gonna be me, okay? I'm just requiring how it's gonna be anchored.
We have any engineers here? I don't want to take money out of any of the engineers' pockets, but we also don't want to force you guys to engineers when I've got an experienced building official that's smart enough to know that, okay, that's going to work. So like I said, when you look at our ordinance, and we've not probably enforced this fully, the ordinance says any work in the city requires a permit application. And the idea behind that is it gives us a scope of what the work's going to be. And we have repeatedly, and I know it's a little bit of a hassle, but we have repeatedly taken those applications and put no permit required. We stick it in the file. When Don's out and around,
I can call up and go, hey, do we have anything on this house?
yeah, he doesn't run people off because it appears that there's work going on without a permit. We know. So like I said, we're trying to make this easier and really get away from having to do permits, and certainly the cost of permits. But if we don't know what's going on, then we can't. And like I said, same thing with the fixing some of these things. We're in a different zone that the ICC applies to when you're landward of a coastal area. So there should be, these structures should resist flotation and wind. But again, we don't at this point think it needs to go to a windstorm engineer and that whole process. Just look at, if it's an engineered building, it's pretty easy. They have specs, give us the specs, do it like Dirksen or Morgan says. If it's not, something other than that, it isn't a pre-engineered building, just tell us how you're gonna keep it from doing those two things, floating and blowing. And that's all we're saying. Right? Is that all we're
Well,
saying?
I care about. It's a safety issue. We don't want somebody's property to get killed by some 10 by 10 shed that decide to go for a float and run into their cars and their porches and, do any damage to the next door neighbor's house. That's all we're trying to do. And it goes with shipping containers. Of course, shipping containers weigh a lot. And when they decide to go floating and rolling, they do a lot of damage. Now, we'll require that to be anchored. Okay? So that's all I got.
I don't want to put anybody on the spot. You got our cards up here. If there's something that we can do better, you have to tell us now. You also don't have to go into pages and pages, please. But like I said, drop us an email. Our doors, we don't, except for Don, who's got a tighter schedule. Most rest of the staff, we don't have appointments. Our doors are always open. So let us know. We're in this together. We truly do want to try to make it easier, less bureaucratic. Sometimes it doesn't work that way for us to be, but that is our goal, to get you done faster. We know it's a challenge working out here already, the end of the road, contractors and such, but like I said, we truly do want to try to continue to make it an easier process. So let us know offline, and we'll look at every one of them and talk about it, I promise you.
All right.
Oh, one last thing, as Don mentioned, with the codes, we're gonna stop the bleeding at 2018. We said that for 2015 codes. But what's important is when we get the new ordinance written that officially adopts that, we're also going to remove all the previously existing exemptions, things that require multifamily, the wiring and conduit, some other things that aren't consistent with the code. Not yet, until that ordinance, but I can tell you, we're gonna get rid of all those other 1980 and other exceptions that are in the code. And we want to try to follow the ICC, so it's easy for everybody, so you know exactly where to go, and there's no conflict.
And just to let everybody know, seismic design does not count here. We're not going to enforce the seismic design, okay? I don't care, build it to windstorm, build it to flooding. There ain't gonna be no no earthquakes here, and if there are, it doesn't matter what you do. Because if we get an earthquake on this part of the world, it's gone anyway. So, there you go.
And then one last thing too, just to put in your cap, especially for those that are building the bigger homes, but basically any size home. If you looked at the code, you know the code actually for almost a couple of years has pushed sprinkler systems in all residential construction. The legislature came in a few years ago and trumped that requirement by prohibiting a municipality for enforcing those sprinkler requirements in single and two-family homes, which is where we're at. I'm hearing that there's a good push to get that legislation removed that would not prohibit a municipality from enforcing what the code now says is that virtually all residential has to have sprinklers. I just want to throw that out there. There's a lot of discussions that are going to happen at levels above me. But like I said, I think there's probably a good chance that if that prohibition right now that keeps us from enforcing the code, keeps all municipalities from enforcing the code, is removed, we may see that. Just kind of be familiar with what it is. I've looked at it, it's a lesser requirement for a residential installation. It's just I don't know of any plumbers that have any experience with it. They use the same potable water, the same lines, there's no additional fire lines involved, and it can be installed by a normal plumber from what I understand, but it'll be a big deal clearly, so I just want to throw it out there to at least do some research, kind of see what you can find, because if in this legislative session it gets removed, like I said, then there'd be no, and we're following the codes. That's in the code, so.
We'll
I don't want to
take a
panic
hard
anybody,
look.
but.
We will take a hard look at it, see what it says, and how it is. If it needs to be ordinance and changed a little bit, we will do it, but unfortunately, the code says we can make it stricter, we can't make it less. Okay? But we'll take a look at it. And, well, he was talking, and that's a plumber with an endorsement or fire extinguisher or plumbing for that.
Yes.
Fire sprinkler systems for the building or the house. There's been that push, but because of that big push by the International Code Council, the state of Texas stepped in and said, no, we're not going to let municipalities enforce that on 1 and 2 families. But the fire marshals, other fire advocates are really pushing the legislature to, and they have, again, if they brought all those pictures of the fires, people dying and burning up, it becomes pretty compelling. I don't know where to stand. I'll try to find out in just from my fire marshal. I've asked to see how that's tracking through, but we'll try to come up with plenty of notes. And obviously we have to phase that in somehow if that was the case. So I just want you to be advised. It would be a big shift. Mainly in the smaller municipalities, we just don't have the plumbers that are that I see that are familiar with it. So anyway, don't want to panic anybody. Just want to throw it out there.
Everybody, do not start petitioning stuff. Okay.
When you're talking about, shipping containers and all that.
Yeah.
You're talking about, homes, offices or whatever, if you're using it temporarily as a Connex or bubble office.
Temporarily, Connex.
You're not worried about that.
Connex, yeah, we're going to want to start getting those anchored down too, because in the course of your building, you don't know when something like that's gonna happen. I mean, you got a couple, you might have a week or so, and then up to 3 days before you know exactly where it's going. But everybody else in the world down here is gonna be trying to get theirs off the island too. Okay? So the likelihood that you're gonna find somebody come pull your Connex off that trailer right then is very low. Okay?
And they do float, and they are heavy. And like I said, but we're also talking about more than likely nothing more than a few augers, you know, properly installed with some strapping, you know, and just something that'll help those resist flotation more than anything else. They're pretty big wind to blow them, but flotation, again, most of them are seaworthy. They're watertight. They're mostly watertight. They float and do some damage. So that's all we're asking.
For a while anyway.
You know, just look at that. And again, those augers are pretty inexpensive. Strapping is not. It's very minimal. We don't want to push it an engineer to tell us, but like I said, we're just seeing more and more when it's an issue. We're going to retroactively go back. If they're going to be there a while, we'll probably ask people to at least make some attempt to secure them.
Because we didn't see them float.
We did see them float and batter and ram things.
Yeah.
Hey, Rick, can you clarify the city code on bunkers?
Bunk rooms. So there was a big debate between council and it just happened to come about at the same time we were looking at short-term rental ordinance with respect to occupancy. So real quick, the background is that once that house is complete, Don, jump in, correct me if I'm wrong. Once the house is complete, then it falls under the International Property Maintenance Code. The International Property, IPMC, has very specific requirements for sleeping rooms, the size of a sleeping room based on occupancy.
I made it real simple, okay? If a bunk room has a door and an egress window, or another door, it's a bedroom. I count it as a bedroom, okay? If it's 70 square feet and it has a door and a window, it's a bedroom. I don't care what you write on there, bunk room, miscellaneous room, whatever. It's got a door and a window on it, and it's a 70 square foot minimum, I count it as a bedroom. What I don't want to see is bunks in the hallways, because that impedes traffic if there should be an emergency. All right? Bunks in a room, if you put them in there after this house is final, I don't care. Because the reason I don't really care is because you're allowed 2 people per bedroom, plus depending on the size of the house, either 4 extra or 6, okay? That bunk room could be your 4 extra, all right? If it doesn't meet the code. But I'm not gonna have them out in the hallways, and I'm not gonna have them in egress pathways, okay? That's what I'm looking at.
So essentially, council, with the final passing of this, said our short-term rental occupancy ordinance will prevail. So if the room was smaller and had bunks in it, then we weren't going to enforce the IPMC on that room. Have bunks in there, provided it doesn't violate fire code. Bunks in a hallway, blocking egress, all those things aren't allowed and won't be. But the size of those rooms or bunks, council said, no, use our own occupancy limits in that respect. So you could have less than a 70 square foot room that was fire code compliant that might house 4, double stacked bunks that ordinarily wouldn't be able to house more than 2 by the International Property Maintenance Code. But they all agreed that no bunks would be allowed that violate fire code. Like Don said, in hallways, and others. So that was the big debate that probably you might have been talking about, where the conflict went back and forth.
Well, basically, right now, I don't impose the IMPC on the house. Okay? We will enforce it though if the house changes and they add more bunks after we file it and they apply for their short-term rental, and we go out and look at it. Let's say with the bunk room, I'm giving it a rating of 4 bedrooms, okay? if they try to say I have 5 bedrooms or 6 bedrooms, and there's those bunks just sitting out there in that room that doesn't meet the requirements of a bedroom, then they're not gonna get that 4th and 5th bedroom count. You understand what I'm saying?
In other words, we had and again, whatever Don allows, Carla's gonna also take a look, because Don's looking at it, we don't know when somebody builds a house, have a pretty good idea, maybe short-term rented, but it's just a house, Don, when he reviews it. Carla, on the other hand, is charged with inspecting those houses when they come in for a short-term rental registration. And I think to Don's point, he had one that had 2 bunks in a hallway, literally in a hallway. They were advertising that as a sleeping room. It's not. You know, if those bunks were, you know, not in violation of the fire code, they could be used for the +2, the +4 or +6, but you can't count it as a bedroom. You know, and again, going back, same thing, living rooms that have fold-out couches, that's where those others go. You don't count it as a sleeping room, but it can be used for people to sleep, again, when it comes to the short-term rental, so.
We had one of those the other day. It was a loft area, clearly not a bedroom, and they were advertising it as a bedroom, not a bedroom.
Those spaces are where the +4 or the bigger houses where the +6 go, but it's not a sleeping room.
If you guys will notice, on the plans that you're submitting, I'm looking at everything in the terms of a bedroom, okay? And I will give you 2 people per bedroom. All right? I don't care if that bedroom has 4 bunks in it. You get 2 people for it, it's a bedroom, if it meets the egress requirements, okay? And then I tell you, depending on, add to it the 4 or 6, depending on the size of the house. So, that's what I put on there, is the occupancy. How many bedrooms plus 4 or 6 extras depending on the size of the house. That occupancy right there is pretty much what that house should hold and what it should be advertised as on the short-term market. All right? Don't do anything else with it. That's not your problem. That becomes our problem and the owner's problem and the maintenance company that's renting it out. Okay? You just build them. I'll count the rooms and how many people can be in them, and we'll go merrily on our way. All right?
And one check and balance on this whole thing is, remember, every sleeping room requires 1 full-size parking space too. So that kind of becomes the property owner's dilemma. Do I really want to count that as a bedroom? So now I need 1 more 9x18 parking space.
And every place but Cinnamon Shores
Yeah,
and
other
Pomelo.
than the planned use developments that have their own parking spots. Yeah, true.
I don't enforce parking code in Pomelo or Cinnamon Shores. I don't understand it. I don't play with it. So there you go. Any other questions? Have we thoroughly confused you now? All right, I'm done. You guys done?
We're done. Thank you, guys.
I gotta go out and do
Appreciate you
some of
being
these
here.
guys' inspections.
Make sure if you haven't filled out a contact information on one of the clipboards around there, that you do that before you leave.
Yeah, you got another one.
Yeah, well, you're gonna have to get your forms in there, because everybody's allowed to do dirt work without a permit.
Okay.
So you can put your forms in there, get them measured and surveyed, and then submit what you plan.
Now we're talking stilts.
Let's talk about houses. That's a different.
You're just making sure you're up above the nine.
Right. I just wanna know where that is.
Yeah.
On the property.
Okay.
All right?
I've done sprinkler systems, FYI, one of the biggest things I ran into,
All right.
didn't have enough pressure in the city.
Exactly. So that's something we've gotta address. We've gotta address that. Okay?
I'll just let you know.